All right, good evening, everyone. I feel like we're the pre-dinner entertainment tonight. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Obviously, this is an important topic for us as a school district, and want to welcome everyone here this evening. There's a few people that I'd like to introduce. I'm John Wesley, Superintendent of Central City Schools. This is Laura Salver, our treasurer for the district. And again, we want to say thanks to all of you for being here. I would like to take a few minutes just to introduce a lot of the folks that are in the audience that will help maybe answer questions later on, the central office administrative team, as well as our school board. And I think I see a couple of our school board members, Dr. Rohr in the back, and John Dahl, school board members. Allison Durnball, our president, is here. And I don't want to leave anybody out. I didn't see anybody else walk in. For our central office staff, Mr. Dan Tarby, who's our assistant superintendent and director of human resources. Over here to my left is Sarah Swan, our community relations specialist for the district. Adam Trello, standing up, secondary curriculum director, Sheree Callipy, elementary curriculum director. Becky Furby, director of special education, and Tammy Durham, director of student services. And somewhere is Shana Morgan, who is our Director of Technology. So I appreciate them being here as well. And I won't forget, everyone's pointed at Mr. Kogel, our Director of Business Operations. He's out, he's in the wrong corner. So I appreciate him being here as well. Since the levies in the November and March ballots were rejected by voters, we have made some reductions and continue to discuss how we try to move this district forward. We want to continue collaborating with you and communicating with all of you about our needs and try to find a way as we try to move forward as a district. So our goal tonight is to help the community understand why the school districts like Centerville have to continue to ask for additional funding in the future. We always share the following disclaimer. The information being presented tonight is factual information from the district. We are permitted to share neutral factual information at any time. We are also permitted to attend public meetings to present information about district finances, activities, governmental actions, even if it's an election, levy, or a bond issue being discussed at the meeting. This is the question I'm asked most whenever the district has a levy on the ballot. Tonight, we are going to cover the main reasons why public school districts in Ohio have to ask taxpayers for additional funding every few years, as well as why Centerville Schools in particular has a levy request on the ballot this coming November. As a public school district, we are required to educate every student who walks through our buildings. We've talked about that a lot over the last year or so. At this point in the school year, we have about 8,220 pre-K through 12 students in 13 of our buildings. This includes providing special education services, career education opportunities, and much more with some of the elective programs that we have. There are also extensive requirements from federal and state government that public school districts must follow, and most of those come from, some of those funded programs from the state and the government come with very little funding, and we have funding issues because we are forced to mandate some of those programs in the district. Some examples of state testing, College Credit Plus, gifted identification, training, in regards to dyslexia screening and training for teachers, adding standalone financial literacy courses at the high school level, and many more of those options that I just shared. Appropriate funding is needed to support all these programs and the requirements. We need to staff our schools appropriately and maintain reasonable class sizes, train our staff members, and provide curriculum materials to help those classroom projects and have classroom supplies for our teachers. We support students. We have social and emotional well-being. We support the well-being. We help our students where they are to help them to move forward. It's important for us to be able to continue to support our students in a variety of different ways throughout the district. Some of those support services include providing counselors, nurses, school psychologists, principals, and school resource officers throughout the district. We offer college and career pathways that prepare our graduates to be responsible members of our workforce and responsible members of our society. Our schools are well known for going above and beyond the expectations or the state requirements. That has been a tradition in our communities to be able to provide a lot of variety of courses and opportunities for students to learn and grow. We have to purchase supplies like bus fuel, paper towels, paper copy machines, paper, pay for electronic systems like student data. All those things are a cost when it comes to operating expenses. We're also dealing with aging facilities and our infrastructure. We've talked about that a lot over the last year. The average age of our buildings right now is about 60 years old, and we do have Magzik, which is now 101 years old for this year. And as Mrs. Sauber will address later in this presentation, our funding remains relatively flat from year to year. But additional requirements from the state of Ohio are added to the district's plate regularly, and the funds, and we need those funds to help support those mandates that we get from the state. So continuing with some of our support services, in addition to the state's minimum requirements, our community has always valued more comprehensive, well-rounded education programs for our students. As what kinds of support services and programming does that include? And I think that's an important question, and that's a question that we get a lot. Teaching and learning is both the core classes and elective credits and opportunities that our students have the opportunity to take. As a high school principal, as a high school administrator, and even as my role as a superintendent, when I interview students, a lot of the feedback I get is that students will say that they appreciate the opportunity to learn and grow from the extracurricular programs, the co-curricular programs, and the after-school activities that we have throughout our community and our school system. That also includes counseling services, transportation, safety measures. I mentioned extracurricular activities like athletics and fine arts, and clerical and operational support. You can see on this slide a few facts about students that we serve. Our enrollment has stayed relatively steady over the last 15 years between 8,000 and 8,400 students, but the needs of our students have changed over time. As an example, the number of English learners have grown from about 150 students in 2015 to more than 400 students this school year. That's a 167% increase for our students who need help in learning the English language. While the percentage of students with special needs have remained relatively the same, about the same in that same time span, many of those students have more significant needs and challenges than what they did 15 years ago. Some additional stats for you. Surveys like the one the city of Centerville completed last summer show that the quality of Centerville schools is the key reasons why most people come and choose to live in our community and in our district. Ongoing funding is essential to maintain the programs and services that attract people to this area.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. So as Mr. Wesley mentioned, we receive our revenue for our general fund from two main sources, and that stays relatively flat from one year to the next. So this is a very simple graph to give you an idea of where our general funds come from, or our operating funds. About 13% of our funds come from the state funding formula, and that varies between school districts depending on wealth factor. So Centerville is considered to be a high wealth district, both because of income of the residents and also because of property values. And so because of that high wealth designation, we receive less funding from the state than many districts across the state. The new Fair School Funding model, or the new state funding model known as the Fair School Funding Plan, continues to emphasize the reliance on the local dollars from communities like ours. So that means that the voted levies make up the majority of our operating revenue, which is about 77%, and that stays pretty consistent from one year to the next. State law, House Bill 920, we talked a lot about that over the last year with the property reappraisal, but that particular law basically freezes the dollar amount that we receive from voted levies, and so we receive the same amount of money from year over year from those levies. So Ohio is one of the only states that has that stagnant growth on those voted levies, and so it makes challenging keeping up with inflation. And it's one of the primary reasons that school districts throughout Ohio rely on the local levies. Individual taxpayers are impacted differently though by that. And so your personal home value changes differently than the neighborhood next to you. And again, we talked about this a lot through the reappraisal process over the last year. And if you have questions about the reappraisal process and what your tax bill did back in January, I encourage you either to contact the county auditor's office or to take a look at our school board meetings from earlier this year. We did some in-depth presentations about how it impacts different taxpayers whose value goes up at different rates. We receive another 7% from what's called home rollback and homestead exemptions. So levies that were passed prior to 2013, you receive a tax credit for either living in your home and owning your home. There's also some homestead exemptions for individuals that meet certain age, income, or disability requirements. The state reimburses those credits to us that people receive on those tax bills. So, and then we have a very small portion of our revenue that comes from things like pay to participate, tuition for court-placed students, and our investment earnings. So as I mentioned, our state funding, it stays very flat from one year to the next. We're what's called a guarantee district. So the amount that we received last year, we're guaranteed that we're going to receive again this year. So the chart here shows that Centerville receives per student from the state. $2,860 is that number. That's very similar to districts that are like Centerville in terms of wealth factors. It's slightly less, but very close to the same. About $1,800 of that per pupil funding actually comes from the foundation funding formula, and the rest of it comes from those rollback and homestead reimbursements that we mentioned. And you can see then from a Montgomery County standpoint, that average and then the state average, how very different we are from a state perspective. A lot of numbers up here. All districts in Ohio are required to publish a 5-year forecast twice a year. We do that in November and then again in May. And so these are these are draft numbers that actually the Board of Education hasn't even seen yet, that we're going to be talking about in the next 2 weeks at our board meetings. But the 5-year forecast gives a snapshot of where we're at from a financial perspective over the next 5 years. You can always go out to our website to find the most recent 5-year forecast that's on file with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. And that forecast right now is what we had submitted back in May. So it's a little bit outdated because we've completed a fiscal year. But again, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about this with the board coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So in fiscal year 24, we ended better than what we had anticipated for several reasons. And so I wanted to just share a little bit of an updated view of that tonight. So on the expense side of things, between all of our expenses, we ended about $1 million less than what we had budgeted. This is less than 1% of our total expenses. And so just to try to put $1 million is a lot, but to put it into perspective, it's less than 1%. When the levies in November and March failed, budget directors, we all held back on any spending if we could, if it was discretionary enough. There's some things we always have to do. We always have to make sure that some things are done. But if there were discretionary things, we did try to hold back on that. We didn't fill some positions, some clerical positions, some paraprofessionals, and various positions throughout the district. If someone resigned and didn't come back, we intentionally did our best to not fill those necessary positions. And so all of that contributed to ending the year a little bit better from a budget perspective. On the revenue side of things, we take our excess funds that we have in the bank, our savings account, so to speak, and we invest those funds. And the investments on those generated about $1 million more than what we had anticipated. So due to the economic times right now with interest rates being very high, we were able to capitalize on that. And so that was a good thing. Now rates are going to go down. At every indicator that I'm seeing is that rates are going down, and so that's a very fluid. It's a very small part of our revenue, first of all, but then it's also very fluid from one year to the next. But these things helped us to end the year with a balanced budget for 2024. But if you look at the red circle, and it's highlighted in yellow, that is, are we operating at a surplus or are we deficit spending? And so it's what I like to call the typical levy cycle for school districts. At some point in time, you start to deficit spend. Your expenses and inflation and things hit, and because our revenue is very flat, we're a state guaranteed district, and we don't receive extra money when values go up on those voted levies. So very flat funding. At some point, the expenses start to exceed the revenue, which is why we have to come back to the voters and ask for additional sources. So we're predicting that our expenses for the next 5 years are going to exceed the revenue that we have slated, or that we're predicting at this point. Things that are factored into these numbers is the reduction plan that was approved back in January. And Mr. Wesley is going to talk more about this and negotiations with our Centerville Classroom Teachers Association. But those two factors are things that have helped to improve our budget over the next couple of years. And so those things are factored in here. What's not included in these projections yet is the proposed levy, the 3.9 mil levy that we have on the ballot. What's also not included in here is the reduction proposal that the board approved, I think it's 2 weeks ago now, or early last week. So those things are not factored into this yet because it's all contingent on whether the levy passes or not. So we do have a cash balance right now, but you can see, and maybe the numbers are too small, but by the time you get all the way to the far right, that cash balance is depleted. And we're not allowed to operate that way. At some point in time, we have to write that. And so the ways to do that is to reduce our expenses, or increase our revenues, or a combination of the two. One of the questions that I get a lot is, what exactly will this levy be used for? What line item in the budget is this going to either preserve or add? And the answer, most people don't like it. It's all of the line items. And so the purpose of the levy is to reduce that deficit spending that we're entering into. It's to help the whole budget and the whole district operation. And it's not slated for one specific program or project. It's for our whole operation. This is those numbers that you just saw on that sheet. This is a visual of that. And again, it's a little bit small, I know that. But you can see in 23 and 24, the green and red lines are very close to each other. And that's where we were operating with that balanced budget. But then you can see that the expenses, the red line, starts to exceed what is going to happen with our revenue. And that yellow line at the bottom is what our cash balance is going to do at that point.
So looking at the impact of our reductions, so the staffing reductions we made going into the school year have had an impact on our buildings. Another round of reductions will definitely affect our comprehensive support services and programming, and we are currently able to offer some of those programs now, and we realize that if the levy fails in November, it will have an impact on some of that programming. We already run a very lean operation as demonstrated by the above average student to teacher ratios and student to administrator ratios. We've talked a lot about those ratios in the past. Our remaining staff, a lot of you are here tonight, have to take on more responsibility because of some of those reductions that we have made within the district. After the November 2023 levy, for more funding, after the November 23 levy, more funding was rejected that we asked for back in November. We went out and started making some immediate reductions within the district, which resulted in a small impact on our budget. It's very difficult once you start the school year to be able to make some of those reductions once the school year started. So it's not like we're going to be able to take a teacher out of the classroom and have that classroom be empty. So it's really hard for us to look at reductions throughout the year. We limited new hires for open positions. We put a freeze on substitutes for our support staff. We minimized overtime costs, and we cut field trips unless they were actually required for a course. And all these reductions are still in place today. The school board next approved a phased reduction plan in January of 2024, which was implemented going into the school year since the March levy did not pass. You may recall it was a two-phase reduction plan, ending up being both phases in that plan. With the cuts from that plan, the anticipated savings from the district's general fund is about $3.5 million. Staffing is the largest cost to any school district because we are a people-driven business or a people-driven organization. We regularly right-size our staff when we have the opportunity. We look at student needs and class sizes as we make decisions about which positions we need to be filled moving forward. So in fact, going back to the 2019 and through the fall of 2023, we were actually down 17 positions before we even asked for the additional money in November of 2023. And so I think that's important for folks to understand, is that we are constantly looking at positions and making changes on how we need to move forward with our staffing. We started this school year with 48 less staffing positions in our buildings. That's 17 teachers and 31 support staff. Many of those reductions were realized through retirements and resignations. But we still have 48 less staff members in our schools than what we did in the fall of 2023. And that also includes 65 less positions that we had in our buildings going all the way back to the fall of 2019. The $3.5 million amount includes some other cost savings in addition to the personnel reductions, including increasing school fees and pay to participate fees, as well as building and athletic field rental fees. Throughout the spring, district leaders and leaders of the Centerville Classroom Teachers Association worked very hard to agree to a 2-year contract, which was approved by the Board of Education very late in May this past year. There will be no increase to the base salary for all district employees for the next 2 years. So the staff, through CCTA and our negotiated agreement, took a 0% increase on pay. And again, that includes our teachers, our administrators, and all support staff. Employees will receive a 1% non-reoccurring stipend up to $1,000 max. That is not added to the base salary, and these payments will not compound in future years. Professional development days were added to the calendar to help provide teacher training opportunities while reducing the need for substitutes across the district. This impacted the end of the 24-25 school year, which was communicated to families once the board approved the updated calendar in June. The district also uses several ongoing measures to save money. This includes working with purchasing co-ops to get better deals, long-term cost savings through energy upgrades, checking prices from different vendors, and looking for grant opportunities. Selling unused equipment, we sell our buses back at the end of the year that are no longer being used or in service. It's another way to generate a little bit more money back to the district. We have a self-insuring employee health insurance program and through workers' compensation. Most of you know, in early September, the school board approved a new proposed reduction plan, and that reduction plan really revolves around what may happen in the November levy campaign. The latest auditor of state guidance recommended that boards approve a reduction plan so that factual information can be shared with the community. These reductions will only be implemented if the levy fails, as I mentioned earlier. Because it's so early in the school year, it would be irresponsible to list specific positions and programs at this point. And this was a talking point that we have at Board of Education for a lengthy conversation, I should add. You know, we're trying to make decisions in August that are going to impact this current school year, but because the district will not receive any additional money if the levy fails in November for calendar year 25, and the next potential for additional new revenue won't be until calendar year 2026. We had to look at reductions now and what those reductions may look like at the start of the next school year. The November levy will provide additional funds toward all of our operating expenses. I think that Mrs. Sauber covered that, and would help us preserve the current programming that we currently have in place across the district. When we make reductions, that impacts our mission to empower and challenge and support every learner to grow every day. So the reductions we talked about will definitely have an impact on our courses that we offer and our class sizes and the programs that we have for our students. Any reductions that we make have an impact, obviously, on our students, and our goal. Sorry, turn the page this in. And our goal all along was to protect our core programs, and our core programs being our state and federal programming requirements that we are required to have to provide for our students. Losing 48 staff members across the district has had an impact on our services, from a school office response times to the amount of support we can provide in the classroom. Educational quality and student outcomes have been impacted. Reducing teaching positions and programs create larger class sizes. Reductions in support staff impact teaching, planning, preparation, and building support. Some middle and high school students are walking further to their bus stops this year because we've consolidated some of our pickup points. And finally, there are goals that are part of our strategic plan that we would love to have some time to address and work on and study in the near future, and hopefully implement some of those goals. Another round of reductions would definitely affect the comprehensive supports, the services, and the programmings that we currently offer. Central Washington Township is a the residents here are really forward-thinking, innovative residents. And it's important, I think, to be able to share this information with all of you. Over the past few years, hundreds of parents, students, and community members, staff members, and administrators have worked on a strategic plan and a portrait of an elk to develop the important skills we want our students to learn, know, and give them an opportunity to succeed in life. Securing additional funding further strengthens our financial position and helps us to move forward with our strategic plan initiatives, such as setting long-term facilities plan. Long-term facilities plan we've talked about for a long time now across the district, and also looking at programs like all-day kindergarten and much more that's embedded into our strategic plan. As you've seen tonight, our revenue remains relatively flat unless we ask the community for additional operating funds. If the levy fails in November, we would not receive any additional funds from the voter levies, as I mentioned, until calendar year 2026. This means we'd be faced with trying to save money wherever we can, including implementing the proposed reductions that were approved by the board in September. This levy is necessary to maintain the comprehensive support services and programmings that we currently offer, continue to implement the implementation of the district's strategic plan, and to keep up with the rising costs related to the district's day-to-day expenses. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation floating around out there regarding the district, and we want to make sure the community can be informed as much as possible, and that's why we're hosting these events. We have a page on our district website dedicated to levy-related information. These are very searchable. If you go to our website, you can search questions and answers as well as related news, stories, and videos. This page also includes information about upcoming community forums and meetings. So speaking of community forums and meetings, we have two more scheduled that will take place. One later this month on Tuesday, September 24th. That will be held at Weller Elementary, and we have the third one will be on Thursday, October the 10th at Driscoll Elementary coming up. Starting over the summer, we've also added 10 community chats, which are more informal Q&A sessions in our neighborhoods or with specific groups. I met with about 45 co-eds, cuties, and minis last night to share information, factual information about the district. So we're looking at additional opportunities moving forward to be able to have the conversations that we're having with all of you. So I think it's important to have those conversations, and I've shared that we're willing to come to your neighborhood and willing to stay in your driveway, talk to your neighbors, and share the information about the district. So tonight, I just want to say thanks again for listening to the financial information. We'd like to open up the floor, and we're going to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions. We're going to ask you to limit your questions or your time with the microphone for about 3 minutes. So we have the opportunity to hear from a lot of you. We have a lot of people in the room here this evening. We're going to do our best. We're kind of up here on the spot trying to answer some of your questions. I'm going to invite the central office team or any of our board members to help answer some of those questions too as we move forward. So